Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Glasp Talk. Today we are very excited to have Stefan Torres with us. And Stefan is an accomplished educator, learning scientist, entrepreneur, and venture capitalist. And he's also mentor at StartX, which is an accelerator from Stanford University. And also he's a partner at several venture capitals. And he has bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley and later MBA from Cornell University, then master's degree from Stanford, where he majored learning design and technology. And he has a deep passion for inspiring innovators to become great leaders and has made significant contributions as a speaker, trainer, and venture capitalist. And today we are very excited to dive into insights and experience of, of like on learning and knowledge transfer. So thank you for joining, Stefan.
No, very excited to be here. Happy to share.
Thank you. So first of all, we are interested in your career and because you started as account manager and sales manager, and then later you became a learning scientist. And we wonder what happened and what made you to go this direction. And could you share a little bit about your background and where was there any turning point in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in California. So I'm actually from the Central Valley of California, which is a place called Fresno. Lots of agriculture. You know, growing up there, you certainly have a lot of exciting things when it comes to family and being in the community, etc. I started my career actually in sales and was very fortunate to do okay at that. Had a great time as in consumer products, selling kitchen housewares and cookware and things like that. Did pretty well. Got up into management actually, and I was one of the youngest managers in the company, and learned so much by doing that. It's just a really exciting thing when you learn how to create business. And I think that's when someone starts in sales. What people don't realize is that the sales creates a lot of the business. There's a saying one of my mentors used to say is nothing happens until someone sells something. And that's whether it's an entrepreneur starting with an idea and recruiting a co-founder, getting investment, it's all sales. So did that for a while, and then kind of continued working and moving up. Got into management and was very fortunate to have just some great people around me who helped. From there, got into software. So started in consumer products, then got into software. It was a SaaS company. I was here in the Bay Area. And after growing up in Fresno, I did a stint in, where was my stint? In Modesto. Well, first it was Stockton, Modesto, and then eventually got out here to the Bay Area. And being in Bay Area, Silicon Valley, whatever you want to call it, I think that certainly had a lot of influence. Started working in technology. From technology, again, that was another sales position. Moved on from there into renewable energy. That was a sales and marketing director position. And really wanted to get my MBA at that point. I had already graduated from Berkeley. Decided to do that. Went to Cornell, and that was an amazing experience. And then after that, I really got the bug for entrepreneurship. I actually launched my first company when I was an MBA student. And, it's a very interesting story. It was a new venture class, new venture management, I believe was the name of the class. And you have to come up with like an idea and create a business plan, et cetera. And so I did that. And it just so happened that business worked. It was a data analytics company in the renewable energy sector. After that, had another startup and, also in renewable energy. It was a customer acquisition platform. That was acquired. So it was the first one, and then worked for a large, investor who had a portfolio of companies. Started working with one of his companies after we were acquired. And that was an amazing experience because he was just a wealth of knowledge. And it was about that time actually that I started teaching. Went back, one of my old professors actually from Berkeley asked, what do you want to do next? Now that I had, a couple exits, and I was like, I'd love to teach. And he's like, what would you want to teach? And I said, entrepreneurship and leadership. And he's like, well, we have this class. And that's how I started teaching. And it was through teaching, one of the things I do for all of my students, I say I give them lifetime office hours, meaning any one of my students who I've had can reach it back out to me anytime to talk about life, business, career, whatever. And so usually every week I have 1 to 2, sometimes more students who will reach out to me and, hey, I have this idea, or hey, I'm thinking about switching jobs, and so forth. And what I was really enamored with when you teach entrepreneurship is the part of learning that entrepreneurs go through. I was really fascinated by this because the information, there was some information asymmetry, but for the most part, especially as, the internet came around and all of these things, you have Twitter, you could literally access all the information. So why is it that some people are still way more successful at entrepreneurship than others? And so I started going down that rabbit hole of learning. Like, what is it? What does it take to actually learn something? What does it actually mean? And that just fascinated me to no end. So as I was teaching, I decided, what, I want to go back and actually learn how people learn. And that's kind of what started me on the path of this learning scientist, transition. And of course, I love entrepreneurship. I've been working with entrepreneurs, whether it was myself or other people, for decades. So that's not changing. But that's really where it started was, how do entrepreneurs learn, and why is it that some entrepreneurs are more successful, and it turns out that a lot of the things that people do, anybody could do. It's just a matter of being able to execute upon them, being able to do things, and that comes down to learning. So
Wow.
here we go.
Very, very interesting, topic and then path. And thank you for sharing. And at the same time, I'm curious, learning is a really broad topic, as you mentioned. And knowing doesn't necessarily, like allow, you to do something. And sometimes execution matters. But you studied learning design, right?
Yeah. So think
What
of it
is,
is how do you create systems, environments, curricula, experiences that people actually learn from? And now I should define, learning, because there's something different between did you learn it or do you know it? Right. And I think when we spoke the first time, I mentioned this, Kazuki, is, knowing or having the information isn't always enough. Right. What I like to say, a mentor once said, if the information was enough, everybody in the United States would be skinny, rich, and happy, because all the information to be skinny, rich, and happy you can find. People still aren't skinny, rich, and happy. Right. Why not? Well, it's not that they don't know. I used to be really large, overweight, obese, and I knew that I shouldn't eat a whole half, liter of ice cream every day, but I did it anyway, right? So I had the information, right? Back then we didn't have ChatGPT, but I'm sure ChatGPT would have said, "Hey, don't eat the ice cream." I still ate the ice cream, right? So there was this thing, and so this is where learning comes in, right? One of my professors at Stanford, the way that she defined learning, there was an element of not only having the information but acting differently because of the information you had. And this was interesting, right? This is okay. So if you know something but you don't actually do what you know, did you learn it? Or do you just know the information? And so that's kind of, I think, the things that I was thinking about. And then, okay, so if you need to act differently, you have to be able to, at least in your brain, recall or do something different at a future state. And so how do you do that better? And this is where the design comes in, is you can actually design learning experiences, curriculum, and so forth that make it easier for someone to recall the information down the road. That's learning design. And it's one of the things that I was shocked by was that, particularly in universities, you have a lot of amazing people who know the subject. Like they really understand X, right? Whether it's geology, sciences, literature, whatever it happens to be, they know it cold. They did their PhD, they researched it for years, they're constantly working at it, and they know the subject, but they've never learned how to teach. They don't know how students actually learn. They don't understand the cognitive process, the experiential elements, all of these other things that go into someone being able to learn, which, if I use my old Stanford professors thing, being able to act differently because of the information that they have in the future. And so that's where the design piece comes in, is that you can actually design learning experiences. You can design learning pedagogy. You can design different things. There's what we call mechanics of learning, things that teachers, leaders, anybody can do that actually help people learn, help people remember or recall is what we would technically call this, so that they are, quote unquote, acting differently because of the information that they have. And this is, I think, the key insight that I had was like, wow, every entrepreneur understands what product market fit is. They hear it, but they may not understand how to actually get to it. Well, getting to it is a different thing, right? And then how to actually do the mechanics so they get there. Those were the things that really resonated with me. And then, to further build on that experiential piece, what I started looking at is, well, gosh, if you could do that, and let's say that you're working with entrepreneurs, like I work with entrepreneurs, if you could use these mechanics to help more entrepreneurs, you actually help them create better companies. They do it quicker. They employ more people. They have greater impact. What else would I want to do? Right. And so that's kind of how I got here. But that was a long about way, Kazuki, for me to explain the design aspect of learning is learning should be designed, right? It shouldn't just be you throw stuff out there, which is how, frankly, most teachers do it, right? They do what they saw because that's what teachers did as they were coming up. There's one of the startup founders I work with here at Stanford. He's creating a whole platform that basically helps teachers create some of these learning experiences and do it better, have pedagogy, experiment, do all this fun stuff to make learning better for students. So again, that's the design elements.
I see. And yeah, and also you tapped on like to the no-do gap, right? Knowing and
Oh,
doing a different and gap,
yeah.
there's a gap. And yeah, I think all the audience, people want to know how to apply things, we learn to daily
Yeah.
life, daily work, as you mentioned, knowing as a founder, knowing product market fit doesn't let us go to, reach to product market fit, right? But
That's
knowing,
exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is what I call the no-do gap, what the difference between what you know and what you actually do. And it's a huge gap, right? We see it all over the place, right? How many times has someone told us something, oh, just do this, and you're like, yeah, I know that, I've heard it all the time, I just don't do it. Right? And so there's a couple things that you could do. One is learn how to create good habits. right? How do you affect your own behavior? One of the professors I studied with here at Stanford, his name is Dr. BJ Fogg, and he's an expert, probably the world expert on behavior design. Actually, I just noticed I have his book right here. Tiny Habits plug. You should get this book. It's amazing. But in it, he actually gives you the recipe, right? And I'll share it with you, but I'd encourage you to go to his website. It's Tiny Habits. The recipe is very simple. Behavior equals motivation times ability times prompt. So it's BMAP. Behavior equals your motivation, your ability, and some type of stimulus or prompt. And if you can understand this concept, you can actually influence your own behavior. You can also influence the behaviors of others. And there's some caveats around this and how to apply it, when to apply it, right? Because you don't want to do it. If you do it in a bad way, you could manipulate people, and that's not what we want. BJ has these two maxims that I think are amazing, which is help people do what they already want to do and help people feel successful. Right. And I really love that idea. But so getting to how do you actually do what you know? Well, the one is you have to have the motivation, right? And BJ calls it the motivation monkey, right? And this motivation, it can be high, it can be low, it can go all over the place. But the higher the motivation, the easier it is for you to do something. And on the other axis, you have the ability. So the harder it is to do something, the less likely you are to do it. The easier, the more likely, right? And so if you think of those two things on an XY axis, right? Your motivation to do it, high or low, and your ability to do it, high or low. Wherever what you want to do is on that, there's a certain threshold that you have to either be above, you'll do it, or below, doesn't happen. And then you have these things called prompts. These are, the little reminders, if you will, alerts. They're little things that get your attention. So think of it this way. If you're getting a phone call from your best friend or your mom, right? She's calling you on your cell phone, but your cell phone's in the other room and you didn't hear it. There was no prompt, or you didn't feel the buzzer. Do you answer the phone? You can't, because there was no prompt, right? And so this is, again, another one of those factors. And in his book, Tiny Habits, BJ really outlines this. He goes over the research that underpins all of these things to learn how do you cross the chasm of the no-do gap, the difference between what you know and what you do. And he there's a whole system that he has. Again, I highly recommend. I'm very biased because BJ is amazing, and I actually worked in his behavior design lab at Stanford. So, full disclosure there. But that's how you do it, is you have to figure out how do you impact your behavior. And there's a way to do that.
I see. Interesting. But just curious, behavior is different from custom or habits, right? So how to make habit behavior into customs or habits?
So think of those as yeah, they're technically different, but habits are behaviors, right?
Okay.
Habits are essentially repeated behaviors. They're things that you do because of certain things, right? That hence the habit. And where do they come from is typically there are prompts, right? So again, so think of this. So behavior is actually stems from some of these habits, or habits from behaviors. And so as you have a prompt, let's say it's and a prompt could be some type of outside thing. It could be an inside your head thing. It could be a biochemical reaction for wanting nicotine if you smoke, right? There's all types of prompts that are out there. But those prompts will essentially push you on a path towards what behaviors you do. This is in turn what forms your habits. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't look at them as mutually exclusive, right? Behaviors and habits. Instead, what I would look at them is these are part of this ongoing organism or life, you know, that is Stephen or Kazuki or Kai, right? It's what is happening there.
I see. Makes sense. Yeah, because like prompt is like includes, internally happening or externally happening. But so if it's internally happening, so it, motivation is related to emotion, so meaning, so it's related to each other, I think.
Yeah, and here's the interesting part is that you can affect them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
This is what most people don't understand about these things is they think the world happens to them, right? When actually, you know, the world happens for them. And if you understand this, okay, here's how I think. And then if you take that thinking to the next one, which is how I feel, and you can focus down what happens, how you think, how you feel, and then how you act. And so your thinking actually influences how you're feeling influences what you actually do. Again, this is one of those things that people get it, like they understand it just intuition wise. But what they don't know is, okay, how do I actually engineer this for myself, right? How do I design it for myself? How do I, learn how to focus, for example, on specific emotions? Because as those emotions change, you can actually change your actions. You can do different things. It's a very fascinating thing, and this is all part of what got me into the learning sciences. Is when you start to understand these and learn this. Okay, how do you now teach this? Right, so that other people can have the same success, etc.
I see. Interesting. So, and could you repeat the name of the book again? So,
Wait, say that again.
Could you repeat the name of the book? So, title of
the book. The book, yeah, the book. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's called Tiny Habits,
okay.
and it's Dr. B.J. Fogg. He's awesome, by the way. And I think the website, I believe, is tinyhabits.com, if I'm not mistaken. But it's really awesome. He also has some like free courses that you can go through, no cost. They're really phenomenal. So I highly recommend it. Again, I'm biased because I was in his class. I worked in his lab. I think he's an amazing person.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
I've actually watched his video and lecture on the internet before. Yeah, I know
he has
the
some
graph
really popular. That's exactly right. Yeah, you know it. It's good stuff.
And yeah, and also you mentioned that teaching how to say enables us to remember more, right? So some people say it's called Feynman technique, teaching, learning by teaching, learning by doing or something.
Yeah, that's one of the
And
mechanics.
Mechanics, right? At the same time, I know another one is like a spaced repetition. It's also like a popular like learning method or technique, I think.
Yep.
Nowadays people know.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Is that,
and interleaving.
does that really effective?
Oh yeah. The thing, here's the thing about learning. I think we talked about this last time, is there are people who've been studying this for, decades. One of my advisors, Roy P., I think he's probably the world's best encyclopedia on learning sciences. The dude knows more than anybody I can possibly think of. And whenever I need, hey, I'm thinking about this. And he's like, oh, you should read this. He's absolutely amazing. But the thing is that the studies of how people learn really give you insight into what's happening both cognitively and physically. Right. You have to understand that humans are all-encompassing organisms, right? Our animal, as far as being able to take in these inputs, whether they're sensory, cognitive, verbal, hearing, sight, it all comes into this one, CPU. Right. Our CPU is made up of several parts. We have a GPU, right? We have all these things in this little brain. And it's funny because right now there's this huge push to how do we make software and hardware that can do things that this little, several pound mass in between, I'll put, like, I'm looking at you guys in between your ears up here. How can we create, things that replicate are similar, right? Because we're not going to necessarily recreate a microorganism, at least right now. Maybe in the future, who knows, right? Everything's fair in the future. But the thing is with the brain is that these stimulations that come as inputs actually change, like they physically change, right? If you understand, how the brain elasticity works with neurons and synapses. I'm not going to get into all that because we could, talk for that for like 10 days. But your brain is constantly changing, right? And this is a very unique thing. So because your brain is constantly changing, there are different things that help it over time. And so when you think of just overall learning, you have something that's called encoding, right? Information or knowledge that comes into your brain. And then it has to be stored there in some way. And the brain is not like a CPU where there's ones and zeros that are written somewhere. It's not like that, right? What happens is we create these electrochemical reactions. And the way I like to think of it is think of them as lightning bolts, right? They're lightning bolts from one position in your brain to another position. And that's a memory, right? That's something, but it doesn't stay there. There's just the path that it went down. And if we want to recall that, right, we want to remember something, we're not going back to the actual memory that happened. It's not like that ones and zeros were encoded. What we're trying to do is get back to the same lightning strike. Make sense? And it's hard to get back to the same lightning strike. So, because your brain has to recreate it, and it doesn't always recreate it perfectly, right? This is why, again, there's tons of studies on this with, people remembering things after the fact, like car accidents. People could see the same thing, but they remember two different things. Sometimes it's not always correct. Most of the time, it's actually not always correct. And the reason is because everybody, what they're doing is they're trying to recreate lightning bolts in their brain. So all of that to say is, okay, so now if we know that this lightning bolts, they happen, we have to be recreated. What's the best way to recreate those? Well, it turns out that if you give it a little bit of time and then remember it or come back to it, we create a stronger lightning bolt. And, maybe the lightning bolt, breaks down. And the next thing, there's something called myelination, which is actually things forming around that make the neural anyway, it gets really complicated. You go look all this stuff up, right? There's great YouTube videos on this. So this spaced practice, interleaving, all of these, doing by teaching, learning by teaching, all of these mechanics, what it turns out is they're helping to shape the brain, right? That's what they're doing, is it's helping to shape the brain. And so, it's very interesting now because now we have tools that we never had before, right? You look at all the stuff that's coming in AI, which is fantastic. Now, how is that going to impact learning? Well, nobody knows. I think there's lots of people now who are going to start studying this because we know that it's different, and we know that it's different because the environment is different, right? When you have a different environment, brains change differently. This is why someone growing up in Japan and someone growing up in the United States of America, this is why they're different, is because this external environment that they're in created the brain. You take someone out of one environment, plop them into another, different learning scenarios, different learning environments, all of these things. So I think that's when what you're talking about, the spaced repetition, the interleaving, all of these things, the reason that they work is because there's better ways than others that help shape the brain so that you can do eventually what you want.
I see. Yeah, very interesting topic. And then also the next question comes to me is like, how to strengthen the path, right? To create that lightning and in the brain. So, some people take notes digitally and some people take notes physically, right? And are
Yeah.
there any difference in the
Yeah.
performance,
So there's actually a
like,
lot, right? We talked about this last time, right? Here's the deal. We have to understand that the brain takes all types of inputs, and right, whether it's physical inputs, whether it's cognitive inputs, and it has to formulate these lightning bolts, right? Again, I'm just using this as an analogy. They're not real lightning bolts in your brain, but there are certain things that work better than others at consolidating these lightning bolts into specific things so that you can recall them later. It turns out, according to studies, that when you physically write notes, right, whether it's a piece of paper, maybe it's on an iPad, a digital iPad, but when you physically do this, the learning is better. You will learn more. You'll be better at it. You'll be able to recall more. Now, the question is why, right? What you would think that, well, gosh, if I'm just taking notes on my computer, I get way more notes, right? I can essentially transcribe almost word for word as someone is talking. But when I have to write notes, I'm not getting all the notes. Turns out this is what, in learning science, we call it a desired difficulty, where what's happening is your brain is now taking all of this information that's coming into it. And what it has to do is cognitively process. It's a heavy, what we call cognitive load. Turns out this is one of the keys for more learning. Because you have to take this heavy, dense, all of this information that's coming at once. You have to understand it. You have to figure out what's the best way to summarize this and then write it physically out in words, right? Symbolic systems. Turns out that's wonderful for the brain. It's wonderful for recall, remembering. And it's wonderful for getting deep conceptual learning and what we call understanding, right? Where you really understand the concepts. Versus when you're just basically taking notes on a computer, what ends up happening is you end up transcribing, right? Meaning you're no longer thinking cognitively about everything that is said. What you're doing is you're matching words into your fingertips to type those letters. That is a very different cognitive process than actually summarizing it, getting key concepts, and physically writing them out, because you're not writing the same thing word for word. You're writing bits and pieces that have larger meaning. Does that make sense? So, this is what I would tell you. And I think I said this last time. I have the perfect way for you to get worse grades, remember less, and actually be a terrible student. Take all of your notes by computer. Transcribe them. It's brilliant, right? That is a wonderful path for doing really poorly in the long term, right? Short term, you may get some stuff. Really good way to do bad long term. To do good long term, now it's going to be painful. It's a desired difficulty. Take notes physically, whether it's in your iPad and you're physically writing them out, or a notepad and paper. Because what's happening is your brain is working harder to take in the information, cognitively process it, repurpose it. You're actually teaching yourself, right? Because you have to write down, hey, he said 5 different things, but I can only write down 1 in the time. So how do I put those in this one little thing? Maybe I make a little drawing and I, do a little thing with 5 little sprockets, which again turns out system, good, spatial. Anyway, won't get into all that. So that's what I would say about note taking. Right now, having been a professor at Berkeley for many years and teaching classes, Berkeley, Stanford, Santa Clara, UC Davis, you name it, I always see students, and I almost feel bad for them, like, because they don't know this, right? No one actually says, hey guys, if you wanted to be a worse student, use your computer to take notes. Hey, nobody says that. They're just like, do it. And in fact, when I tried to do that at Berkeley, students would complain like, oh, I want to take notes on my computer because I get more information. Information's not enough. You got to actually learn something anyway. So yes, I hope that answered your question there, because I think that was a lot.
Interesting. Yeah. And yeah, thank you for the great advice of becoming the worst student so in the class. Yeah. Yeah, but just curious, like, even if we take notes on the computer, but if we at the same time, if we like, summarize it in our brain, and so not just transcribing, so what teacher says, so but if we do like, summarizing, so cognitively processing what teacher says, summarizing, taking notes on computer, so it's the same thing?
No, it's not.
No.
You have to understand why.
Mhm.
Because think about, like, you have your keyboard in front of you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Go put your fingers over the keyboard, and then think about when you type, what do? What's the actual physical motion of typing?
I just listen to what professor says.
Yes, but
yeah,
what's
I don't
happening?
see-
What's
Brian,
what's happening
I
with your
mean,
fingers?
it's just automatically,
Yes.
moving, not looking at it.
Yes. Your fingertips are going up and down,
Yes.
right? Now, do you have a pen?
I can
Yes.
prepare. Yes.
Get a pen.
Yes. Yeah, I have a pen.
Okay.
Yep.
Take a pen and write out your name. What, just in the air? What happens to your finger? What's happening?
Like moves
Like,
like drawing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see the difference between and this? Right? It's an actual different physical movement, right? This is what we call embodiment. Because you're doing something physically different, it's not the same. It turns out in learning, the way that we learn with speech and symbols, there's something that happens when we actually write something out that's differently in our brain than simply doing this. Now, of course, who knows, we're in a very different time, and all of these studies were predicated on past research, and there's new research that's going to be happening, and maybe it will change, but right now all the studies actually show that there's a difference when you physically write out words than when you type them. And it makes sense because you actually see it. Doing this is a lot different than doing this, right? Your body works differently, your head, your shoulders, there's a whole physical embodiment. Again, most people don't realize this. They just think, oh, I'm writing it, I'm typing it. It's the same thing. The words are the same, but they're not, right? And this is it. This is the nuance, right? This is the nuance that most people, like, think of it. There's a really good book here, another one, Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. I don't know if you guys have read that. It's amazing. But he uses the analogy of heuristics and like the thinking fast and thinking slow. Most people think really fast. I do it all the time. We all do it because it's a shortcut. But when you actually start to dig in and actually see what's happening, it's that slow piece. And so this is, I would say one of the reasons why typing is very different than writing. Interesting, isn't it? It's fun when you start to notice, because most people don't think about it. And again, this is all learning science, right? Most people don't actually think about learning and all the things that go into learning.
I see. So it's probably a mean question, but so if we like take notes with Apple Pencil on iPad, is that different?
So well, right now, if you're, I don't have my My iPad's in my other room. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have my Apple Pencil, but it would be similar. And the reason being is because you're doing the same motions. Think about as a kid, right? As a kid, you had to learn to do the motions. And so there's this in what we call embodiment. I mentioned it earlier, where the learning and everything is part of that, the word. Think about your name. I like using your name as an example because the way you write your name, that means something. There's actually something there when you physically write it out, when you make your signature. There's all of these things, and you're going through the same motion, which means you're using the same parts of your brain, which again tie into the learning. And right now, what the learning science say is that physically writing notes is better than typing, right? Again, who knows? Maybe in 10 years, as more research is done, it'll shift. So far, it hasn't. All of the studies indicate that.
I see. And also we talked last time, but there is a preference, right? I prefer to read on Kindle,
Yeah.
e-reader, and also read on physical books.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter your preference, right?
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? And I'll use this in the context. The context is a lot of people say, well, I'm an auditory learner, meaning I learn best by hearing, right? Or I'm a visual learner. If I see it, I actually learn better. Bullshit, right? What the science actually say, right? And what the research shows is that learning happens in all different ways. And actually, sometimes the harder one to slow down and read something, even though you would prefer to hear it, is actually the best way to learn something that is super dense or technical, or vice versa, right? I'm using these as analogies. But every one of us has a preference where we prefer to take in stuff that we hear. We prefer to see it. We prefer to read it. We prefer to actually go and play with stuff with our hands. Those are preferences. They're not actual learning styles that you learn best by. That's a myth, right? And it's a myth that is still out there. Teachers say it all the time. Oh, I try and teach students in their specific learning style. Bullshit, right? There is no one best learning style. What it is students have different preferences, and there are different things to learn things, right? If you're learning geospatial things, sometimes being in the maze is going to help you. But for some people, that's not the best condition for them to learn, right? So that's what I mean by this, the styles and the preferences. We all have our own preferences. Everybody, you have them, I have them. Everybody has their preferences, but learning styles that we learn best by, it's not necessarily true, because there's different things that different ways that you learn, and different mechanics that help you learn specific things in better ways. That's what I mean there.
I see. And then
I just realized I cussed.
Yeah.
I hope you can cut out the cussing. I hopefully that's not one of the banned words.
No, yeah. By the way, then I'm curious about, how do you manage or keep your knowledge, and do you use any tools? How do you take notes? And because I think you have less, know-do gap. I think what is the
I
best
don't know
for
about that. Everybody
learning.
has it. Yeah, everybody has it. There's certain things that I do that have helped me. Right. One is, I think I mentioned this to you last time. I have here, I have these little 3x5 cards when I read, where I kind of do my own little summaries. You can't see. This is actually this was from what is it? Oh, this is interesting. This is from Dr. Bridget Barron, another one of my Stanford professors. It was interest in self-sustaining learning as a catalyst for development, a learning ecology perspective. So this is a research paper that she wrote. And I put, after I read it, I put like all my stuff in here. And then I review these. That's why it's on my desk here. Is I come and I just kind of review them. I forget it, come back to it. And that's how you kind of build on those type of things. That's what works for me. These ones don't have, there's another one. Which one was this one? This one was Packard and Cole, Institutional Foundations of Human Evolution, Ontogenesis and Learning. So this is just the fun, some people probably wouldn't call this fun, but things that I have as research papers that I go and think about. I'm kind of a nerdy dork like that. But yeah, so I take notes. I physically write notes. I make little drawings. Okay. Let's drop some. Let's see if this one has. This is another one of my resources. And I actually, you could see some of the drawings that I make and different things that I'm thinking, different structures, little graphs that I write in here. This is, again, just to kind of help me remember, learn. And then the key is I go back and I review these things that's why they're right here, is I'll reflect and go see. And what that does is it creates the memories. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, there was something else. Oh yeah. And that's how you kind of, again, ideally expand your melon, your brain.
But over time, your notes will be bigger, right? And you
Yeah.
sometimes you cannot carry every time. So have you sort of digitalized your notes and because make
No,
it
I haven't.
searchable?
I haven't.
Oh,
Yeah, I haven't. It's funny. You can't see it down here, but down here I have every year. I'll just show you this. So I actually do take notes. Sorry. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I use a physical thing where I write in my days and everything that's happening and kind of plan it out. And so what I do at the end of the year, and then this is my actual schedule here. What I do at the end of each year is I'll spend a week between Christmas and New Year's, and I'll go through every day of the year. And each day I'll reflect on what I did, what I was doing, what I was thinking, my thoughts and everything. There's little, graphs and things like that. And it gives me a chance to reflect. But then what I can do is I can then go in and I can look here at the past. I have about 20 of them down here. So the past 20 years, I have these physical books.
So you take diaries.
Yeah, it's kind of like a diary, a reflection. I can go and tell you what I was doing, 8 years ago on August 14th, because it's in my little thing here. I can tell you who I was with, what I was thinking. It's all here. But have I digitized it? No.
But how do you search for information? Let's say, do you use Zettelkasten method or, to index your past notes, like, especially for books or academic papers?
No.
Oh.
No, you're I want to get what the assumption that you're making is that, well, if you could just find the information quickly, you would remember it better, right? That's a faulty assumption. Because as I was explaining, the hard part actually is helpful, right? So when you can't remember or you can't find it, that searching, I was trying to remember, what was I doing? There was something that I said, it was about da 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 da, and there's this difficulty to get it, and then eventually you get it. You're like, that's it. That actually tends to help you learn better, right? And so that's because you forgot it. It went out, you came back, you reignited the lightning rod, right? And so you did it. Again, for some people, yeah, they may like that. Is it actually I shouldn't say it's not helpful, because it is helpful, right, to get it quicker. And I'm not trying to say that you don't want to be able to access it quicker and so forth. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that it doesn't matter whether it's digital or whether it's physical. The idea of remembering and trying to go back to when it was and doing that search, whether it's, you know, a digital search or whatever, it's a similar thing. So it doesn't matter whether it's digital or physical. Right now, it may, you know, maybe easier if it's digital. Okay, maybe it is, but because it's physical and I have to go back to the day, that doesn't actually make it worse. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Interesting.
Makes sense, yes. And sometimes easy come, easy go, right?
Yes, and that's a great way to put it. Really great way, Kazuki, is because you know, we have a short-term memory and a long-term memory. The short-term memory is fleeting, right? And what happens, so like when you take notes, you know, with your computer, typically what that is you're getting stuff into your short-term memory, but you're not going to have it long-term to use. This is why I said, if you want over the long term to be a worse student and to get less from your education, whether it's college, high school, whatever, take notes on your computer, right? Because you'll get through the class, you'll get enough in short-term memory to pass your classes, maybe even get good grades. But that's not going to be there for your long-term knowledge that you're going to use to transfer and so forth. And you guys have all seen this, right? Have you ever met people that are like, wow, how do they know so much? It's like they're walking encyclopedias. And typically it's because they had to work really hard at actually learning it. And usually that was, you know, physical learning, forgetting, repeating, come back. Now, don't get me wrong, there are corner cases that people have, you know, memories off the charts, right? There are some of these type of things, but for the most part, they've worked really hard on learning.
It's like you, right? You know, walking.
Yeah, I do. I work hard. These, you know, my bookshelf here, a lot of people just think, oh, they're books. These are books I've actually read. I have another bookshelf over here of stuff that I'm reading, and I like other things over here that I'm reading, but these ones I've actually read. And I used to have another one, but I got rid of all the books. Those are the books I've actually read. Now, can I remember every word on every page? Absolutely not. But do I remember different ideas that came, you know, in certain books that I still utilize? Absolutely. Right. And that's, you know, that's the key to learning, I think.
Nice. Interesting. But yeah, but in the future, yeah, I understand, you know, the whole concept, but you know, in the future we cannot, like, how to say, we, you know, the next generation, future generation needs to, we will certainly use computer and PC
Oh,
to
yeah,
do
absolutely.
something, right? And also we need to, how to say, collaborate with AI. I think AI is like a huge topic in learning, I guess, nowadays, for in classroom, also, you know, like learning for work and so on. So how should we use AI? Like, you know, in the future, like, because some people say, you know, because of AI, some people say, you know, our intelligence, you know, will be not, how to say, will be get worse because of AI, because we rely on everything on AI. So we let AI do everything so that we have less time on thinking about something. So what's your thoughts on AI and how should we deal with that?
So look, I'm super bullish on AI. I think it's one of those things that you know, I remember when ChatGPT launched. Now, by the way, AI is not new. I want to make sure, you know, I know right now everybody's, you know, on the hype train because of ChatGPT and the actual accessibility, but the stuff that underpins that research has been going on for decades. Right. Back when I was at Berkeley in the 2014-15 era, people were working on AI. In fact, it was a kind of a bad word, and they started calling it machine learning because you couldn't use the word AI. It was in, what did they call it? An AI winter or whatever, something like that. But I think it's going to change. But we have to understand what AI actually is. right? What is artificial intelligence? Well, it's software with statistics. Oh, perfect. What does that mean? So let's be clear. The machine isn't intelligent. The software running on the hardware is giving us humans information that we perceive as intelligent. Okay. So I think that's one of the first things to understand. It's like, look, the software and the thing it's not like biological intelligence. This is software intelligence. And so we really got to make sure, we understand that. I think the other thing we have to understand is the way this works is you're taking previous knowledge, like in regular learning, we have prior knowledge, which is data. We're processing it in a way using really fun algorithms, math, probability, statistics to give us what a reasonable human would classify as meaningful information, which is wonderful. I think that's great. And I think that it's only going to get better. Now, will it be able to do what humans actually do, right? And when I say what humans do, like look at kids. I recently had a barbecue, and a friend of mine had her kids over here, and they were young, 4 or 5, and you see what they're able to do and learn with no data, right? Is software going to be able to do that right now? It doesn't look like it, right? And I know there's a lot of people. I was talking with a computer scientist from Berkeley yesterday. There's a lot of people working on how do we actually, improve this? How do we have machine learning learn without prior data? How do we have it learn with like fewer data points? Like there's a lot of people doing this, but right now the software isn't there. Will it be able to be in the future? Maybe. Okay, so now we've classified, okay, what's really going on here? I used to in Berkeley, I had I don't want to call it a debate, but I was talking with a friend who was into the machine learning, and I was like, look, this is math. This is math. I don't know any other way to put it. This isn't like intelligence, it's math. And he would argue, well, but it's like, okay, tell me it's math. He's like, yeah, you're right. It's all math. Okay. It's taking words, using equations, algorithms, math to give you other words, So anyway, okay. How does this affect humans? Well, I think it affects humans in a very fun way, in that we now are going to be able to have tools, and I look at it more as a tool right now, that enable us to get different perspectives based on larger data sets, right? I can come up with my own stuff, but I think it's cool to see what, put a whole bunch of potions together and see what it comes up with, because some of the stuff I like, some of it I don't like. Now, how does this affect learning, right? This is the interesting question, because if you no longer have to recall stuff, right? That's what learning actually is being able to recall something and then act differently because of what you know. Will it actually affect humans' ability then for recall? We don't know yet. It could not, right? Will humans be stupider? Maybe not. I don't think anybody has the answer yet. We have lots of speculation. But here's what we do know. We do know that our education system has certain outputs. We also know that human beings have mental things that happen to them as they develop that enable them to, you know, process things cognitively, to, you know, we talked about knowledge transfer, to take one thing in this domain and apply it to something that's completely different, unrelated, and use that same stuff. And we haven't been able to see software intelligence do that as of yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to, but as of yet, it hasn't been able to. And the reason being is because the data constraint, right? There's this data constraint. Because you've trained it on this, it needs to be in there. There's an old episode of Silicon Valley. It was a TV show. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It was on HBO.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes was Hot Dog, Not Hot Dog. And I don't know if you recall this, but the main character, you know, creates an artificial intelligence system. And because he didn't have enough data, he didn't have all the things, it could do one thing. It could tell you if it's a hot dog or not a hot dog. And right now, unless we have training data, we can't get to anything beyond hot dog or not hot dog. People are working on this. I hope they solve it. How does this affect development, right? And now this is the key, right? So we have learning, right? I can recall this. I know it. I'm going to do something different because I know that, you know, in history, this happens and yada, yada, yada. But how does AI impact the development of the brain, right? Will neuroprocesses be different if children are using digital things? We don't know yet. This is all ongoing. Now, the optimist in me says that, look, humans are probably the most adaptable species, you know, in the universe, you know, big claim. And because we're so adaptable, we're going to, you know, ideally evolve in a way that is going to be using these technology tools. But I think we have a long way to go, right? There are, what, 8 billion people roughly now on this planet Earth. There's a lot of people that aren't going to have access to AI tools, right? I don't know if you guys have been to some countries that have really large populations, let's say India, China. There's a lot of people that aren't, you know, they're not buying iPhones or even Huawei phones or whatever, because of the means. And so when you think about how does AI impact learning, for some people, it's definitely going to impact it. For others, at least for the next decade or two, it's going to be a while. You know, when we look out 100, 200 years, then I think it gets really interesting, right? Because you have a lot more time. And, you know, who knows? You know, who knows what happens in the next 200, 300, 400, 500 years. I always like to think of it, you know, I don't know if you guys have traveled to, you know, ancient cities, like when you go to Rome or you go to Greece or had a chance to go to Amman, Jordan, and you look at these that are centuries old, right? And you think back, what were those people thinking, you know, 2,000 years ago, right? Could they have ever envisioned a scenario where people would be sitting in different parts on the planet talking over airwaves with little things in our ears so that we could hear each other? Like, they could have probably have never even imagined that. They were like, man, imagine, you know, the next Parthenon. And so who knows how it's all going to shape out? We won't be around for it. Like 2,000 years from now, unless, you know, maybe you guys know something I don't know, but 2,000 years from now, we're probably not going to be here, right? And the planet will be here. Humans, we'll see, right? You know, how will the societies look? We don't know. We can look at 2,000 years ago what societies look like. You know, we have the ruins. But what will, you know, we don't know. Is AI going to impact learning? Yes. Is AI going to impact humans' abilities? Yes. Sometimes in good ways, sometimes in not so good ways. Yeah, so that was a long way of giving my thoughts on AI.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, and also you tapped onto like knowledge transfer in it, which is one of, another our main topic, today. And then so yeah, since Glasp is a platform where people learn and share what they are learning and reading, it's kind of, like a knowledge transfer in that sense. But what is the better way to transfer knowledge like among people in
Better way.
your
That's an
opinion?
interesting question. What is a better way to transfer knowledge?
Or like, how people can learn better from other people. So in digital,
Yep.
yeah, platform.
Yeah, well, there's all different ways to learn, and again, the challenge with what you said is better, right? Because what's better for me and better for you may not be the same thing, right? This is one thing. It's almost like the research studies. All of them have a way. It's not the way, because no matter how statistics work out, there's always some probability or some people that don't, aren't affected. Drugs are like this, right? Some people take aspirin. It works for 80, 90% of the time, but there's 10% of the time it doesn't work. You still have a headache, whatever. And so in what you're talking about, knowledge transfer specifically, it's how do you take what I know and my view of the world and share it so that someone else can learn from that view. And the challenge with that is that view may not be right for that person, right? I say this a lot when I mentor founders, is everything that I say is a way, it's not the way. You have to figure out what's best for you. And there's this conception that just because it worked for someone else in a particular way in a particular time doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. This is one of the big challenges I have with all the advice people give on like Twitter or some of the social platforms. They make this false assumption that because it worked for that person at that time, that person knows different things, they act in different ways. You're never going to be able to replicate that specifically because you're not that person. You don't have the same thoughts. You don't have the same knowledge base. You're not in the specific situation. You're not at the specific time with these specific actors. What you're trying to do is, okay, what can I take from that applies specifically to me in this case with everything that I know and my circumstance? And this is where it comes up to me and my ability to judge things. And for some people, they judge them correctly more often than others. Some people, they judge them worse off. Sometimes AI can help with this now. Sometimes AI doesn't help with it. Now, all of that being said, right, that was my disclaimer. Knowledge transfer is a very complex yet simple idea. It's being able to take the building blocks or essential learning, essential knowledge in one domain, applying it to another domain with positive outcomes. An example. One example could be, let's say that you're learning about biology, and there's a specific biological system that works, and you take that and you figure out a way to model it in computer science using code, and it happens to work. That's knowledge transfer. You took this, biological system, you used some type of coding based on that system, and now it worked, right? That's knowledge transfer. The challenge with this, and remember I said AI hasn't been able to do this. The challenge with this is what humans are really good at doing. Well, I shouldn't say all. Some humans are really good at doing is being able to see this biological system and how it can be used in code to do something else, right? Humans, we do this. We do this all the time. Software is not able to do it. So how do you help humans see those patterns more often? Well, it comes down to practice. You actually have to practice. You have to, school is a great example. School is nothing more but practicing a lot of random stuff. And a lot of it sticks. Some of it doesn't, but it's all practice. There was many years ago in the United States, there was a basketball player who got fined for not going to practice, and there's a famous rant, you could probably find it on YouTube, of him going, practice. We're talking about practice, not the game, practice. And it's this practice, this ability for humans to do stuff, experiment is what we would call it, in novel ways that enable transfer. And sometimes that practice is mental practice. We're like, oh, I wonder if this would work. Oh, I wonder, right? That's mental practice. Sometimes it's actually writing it out, right? But it's this practice that enables humans, at least, to be able to take knowledge in one domain and apply it to another. And so how do you do that as a platform? Well, I think one is it's dependent on who comes to the platform, right? Because if you have people that are closed and not interested in practicing, or not interested in even doing it, well, one, they're probably not going to come to the platform. And if you're spending money to get people there, that'd be bad. But in sales, we talk about knowing your audience, right? And so by knowing the audience and making sure that the whatever is being shared with them is intriguing, is interesting to them, I should say intriguing to them, and has these specific elements, I think you're going to get more knowledge transfer. There's also certain things you can do mechanics wise, and questions and all these type of things, but we don't have time to get into all of that. That was a really long, convoluted answer to how do you help transfer more skills for people.
Yeah, thanks. Interesting. But it's kind of like different perspective question, but do you
Sure.
have any favorite product, software, or organization that helps people learn? So for example, Khan Academy, or like just online course at university. So any like favorite
Yeah.
product or
So
yeah.
Khan is really good. I think it depends on what you're learning, right? There's there's different types of learning, right? Or I should say there's different types of learning environments. One learning environment is a formal learning environment, right? This is you actually going to class. There's also things that are structured learning environments. So these are the online courses, MOOCs, etc. There's other type of learning that is happening just in the environment, or what we call informal learning. And what you have to understand is that this is actually bigger than formal learning, right? When we think learning, most people think of you go to school. You actually do most of your learning outside of school. And learning comes down to a couple of elements then when it comes to environment. Bridget, who I was just talking about, that paper, it's kind of funny that was up there. So learning environments can be anything. One of my favorite learning environments actually are like conferences and summits, where you get people sharing ideas and bantering about. And the reason is because, one, I like to kind of hear how people talk and think and so forth, but it stimulates me and my ideation. In fact, sometimes some of my best work is when I'm at a conference and there's like speakers up there speaking, but I'm actually in the back, like writing my own stuff. For some reason, that's a great learning environment for me. The other learning environment that I love the most probably is on an airplane, on a long distance flight between, San Francisco and Japan. It's like 11, 12 hours, or San Francisco and Europe. I will bring a book. I will write stuff. I will think. I will digest things that happen. That to me is an amazing learning environment for me. Now, by the way, I recognize for many people, that's a terrible environment for them to learn. There's the baby's crying, there's interruptions, it's a small cramped space. Like, it's a terrible learning environment. But for me, that's one of my favorite learning environments. And so what I want, I think, you guys to take away from this is that learning is not just someone coming to a platform and listening to something. Learning can also be someone coming to a platform, listening to something while they're on a subway and a street performer is dancing, and it sparks an idea for a new business. That can also be learning, right? But we don't think about that as learning because our contextual, base is the learning environment of actually sitting and watching something to intake information, ideally for quote unquote learning. But that's not the only way learning happens. So this kind of goes back to the first question of transfer. We make this faulty assumption that in order to learn, I have to watch a YouTube video. In order to learn, I have to take a class. In order to learn, I have to read this book. It's not true. In fact, apprenticeship, which is probably one of the most tried and true elements of learning, has been done for centuries. And now a lot of things are more of a cognitive apprenticeship. Entrepreneurship certainly is. So yeah, that was a long, convoluted, again, explanation. I hope it's not too much there, but you should think of learning and specifically learning environments and contexts. You also have role models. Role models are super important to learning. The environment you're in and the role models that you have will certainly influence how much you learn. This is why you'll see when political figures are in power, what you tend to find, and there's some research on this, that people start, imitating them. They start acting the way they do. And the reason, and it's both conscious and subconscious, is that role models play a really big impact on our learning, how we process things, how we actually end up manifesting in the world. So anyway, sorry, I know that Kai, that was a long response. Anything else?
So yeah, we are just recording, but so is your time okay? So just
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to go here in a little bit. I think I have 10:30. So
okay.
Cool. In that sense, I was curious, that make what you said makes sense, being exposed to many a certain circumstance or environment, and also like in that sense, walking in the street, sometimes help us, bring new ideas and so on. But what's the thoughts on like social media, like Twitter or LinkedIn, by the way, as a knowledge transfer platform? Is that a good environment?
Yeah, in some cases, yes. In some cases, no. Right? Realize that it's a curated and cultivated environment by people who are not you. So that's one thing to understand. Whenever you're using social media, make no mistake, you are not in control of what gets shown to you. Someone else is, right? And so remember that. I mean, it's bad, good. Everybody has their own opinion on it. I'm agnostic, but just realize it's a cultivated environment. It's kind of like you as a person, right? You as a person comes down to three things. Learning is like this, certainly the way we show up in the world, and it's one biological. right? There's certain things that happen, chemical processes in your brain. There's biology. 2 is your environment, the environment that you're in. And 3 is your role models, whether they're conscious or subconscious role models. These are the things that actually are going to influence your life more than anything else. Biology, your gene expression, certain environments kick things on, take things off, whether you develop disease, it's biology. The environment you're in, at least until, in the United States, until you're 18, is pretty much determined by whoever your elders are, right? Because your parents, your family, they put you in that environment and you can't change it. Once you get to a certain age, you can change it, right? You can just get up, move, leave, whatever. People won't like it. Some people will like it. Most people do it in the United States for university, for college. But the environment is a very important aspect. And then the role models, and I talked about this earlier. There are conscious role models, like I look up to this person. There are other role models that just come in subconsciously. So let's talk about one right now in tech that a lot of people talk about, Elon Musk. Could be a good role model in some sense and a terrible role model in others, right? Depends. It really depends. And so if you go onto a social media platform and you're seeing, I don't know what they call sheets. I don't know what they're called now instead of tweets, but you're seeing this, and he's influencing, right? Whether he realizes or not, and whether you realize it or not, he's influencing you because he's a role model. And he may be one that you don't like. He may be a role model you hate, but that influence is still going to seep into things that you do. It'll seep into the way you think. This is why the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is your ability to focus and ignore, right? There's some things that you want to focus on and ignore it. I'll give you an example. As a kid growing up, I loved television and movies and things, and I still do love movies. I go all the time. But now I realize that that's such a huge time suck. And I could spend hours, same with social media, hours. And I realize it's not really doing anything good. Now, here's the thing. I also love sports, and particularly I love college football and college basketball, and so now I'm about to enter the time where I actually watch television again. I actually cancel my subscriptions at the end of football and basketball season, and I don't watch anything. And then when it comes back, I'll watch it. But I realize that there's influence, that there's role models, whether they're conscious or subconscious, that are coming into play. Whenever I get on LinkedIn, right? I think LinkedIn is probably one of the more benign social media platforms now. I'm not getting a lot of political stuff. Typically, I don't see a lot of hate stuff and, stuff that conjures, negativity. So I tend to like that one a little bit more. Some of the other ones that, I want to particularly ignore the stuff that I don't want to influence me. And I think this is, I think of my nieces, right, who are, now in middle school and one going into high school. I feel for them because they have no idea how much they're influenced by people who have one motive in mind, right? Whether that's power, money, something else. And, I was lucky. I grew up before some of the social media. So I was influenced in other ways, television ads, right? Same thing. So we all have these things, but until they start to realize that, it can certainly be detrimental. Yeah, so that's what I think. I think there's some social media platforms that are better than others. Again, just realize consuming and producing are very different things. And I think it's better for young people to do different projects and create rather than consume 100% of the time. That to me is probably the more interesting thing on social media is it now is a platform that people can be creators and, explorers and experimenters and documentarians more so than just consuming what everybody else is doing, because that's that's not a very fulfilling thing in the long term, I think, for many people.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Since our time is running up, and we have sorry, two more question, and one is
perfect.
like, do you have any advice? Our audience are like aspiring founders, writers,
Oh,
and
great.
people who wanna learn better. And do you
Yeah.
have you shared already many advice, and like academic research or so, but do you have some advice to us, those people?
To learn better and to be a founder, is that the question?
Uh, to learn better, I think, yeah, generally, yeah,
Okay, to
yeah.
learn better. One is be open to learning, right? A lot of times people they think they're open to learning, but they're really not. They come in biased. And um, I think it's important, one of the challenges I have with social media is they have this thing, followers, right? I follow this person. Like, don't ever be a follower, be a student, right? Learn from them and realize you can learn from anyone. You can learn from people who suck, right? Because they'll show you what not to do. You know, sometimes I think failures should give seminars. Here's how I messed everything up. Because if you did, you'd be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is be very careful who you're learning from. Who you learn from matters. There's a lot of people who will give advice. There's a lot of people who will share things. And it's really terrible advice. It's bad advice. It's biased and they don't realize it. And so this is probably one of the things is cultivate who you are a student of. And it's not just who's the richest, right? It's not just who has the biggest following. It's who has values, who has relationships that you want to have. Who are people that connect with others in ways that are meaningful and add value, right? I think those are some of the things those are the people you want to learn from. Not necessarily the most, loud, not necessarily the most quote unquote popular. I think many of the most popular people are probably the worst people to learn from. Um, yeah, so that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a really great advice, and thank you. And also, this is the last question. And since
Okay.
Glasp is a platform where people share what they are reading, learning as their digital legacy, and
Mhm.
we want to know, what kind of legacy do you want to leave, or legacy or impact do you want to leave behind for the future
Legacy or
generation?
impact? You know, I'm smart enough to realize that 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, it's not going to matter, right? There are some fundamental things, right, that matter and don't matter. I think what the legacy that I want is the people who I worked with, I want them to feel better for having worked with me. The people who I worked with, I want them to feel that, they were valued and that we had a good time, that we had fun, that we enjoyed our time together, that there was more to life than just monetary gains or power or these type of things, that relationships were so much fun. I think those were that would be the legacy that I would want to leave, um, is just making sure people, felt better when they were around me. Because at the end of the day, we're all here for a limited time. You, me, everyone. And we're not going to be here in a couple thousand years unless, who knows, maybe there is a breakthrough and we are. But, right now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And so because of that, how do we make sure in these moments that we have, I always like to tell my students is we have a finite past, right? Everything that we've done up until this point is finite. We can't change it. We can't go back to yesterday and change things. So we have a finite past, but we have an infinite future. Right? And this is a really wonderful thing, right? We have every one of us has a finite past that we can't change. But from this moment forward, it's infinite. We could do I could like jump off here and go outside and dance around the street if I wanted to, right? It's infinite. The possibilities abound, right? And so how do we as humans make the most of our infinite futures? How do we, whether that's in working, whether that's in relationships or what have you? And to me, it's how do you have joy and fun and really be around folks that inspire you, that make you feel good, that help you be successful, help you do things you want to do, like make you just really fired up to live life. I think that would be the legacy. So awesome. Well, hey, gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Hopefully you got something and it helps you. I need to run here to my next call, but it really was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Bye.